What's up everyone? Welcome to another Joel Arsenault YouTube video. In this one, I'm going to be working on Jacob's Bullet. I will be test fitting the STX 1500 engine as well as modifying the hull and the pump so that I can fit a 148 pump into this thing. If you guys want to support me on Patreon, there is a link in the description below. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you guys want to see extras, outtakes, and random nonsense, there is a link in the description below to my second channel, which is called Lowered Expectations. Let's get into this video. Where are all my strappies? Alright. Lifting from the top, it seems quite stable. There we have it, folks. It is on the floor. That makes me feel a lot better. Not only do I have bench space now, but this can't fall on the floor if it's already on the floor. That went a whole lot easier than I thought. First test fit. Oh wow. As you guys can see, a lot more room in there than you would think, probably, with a 1500 being in this hull. The fitment issue is going to be basically from the oil pan hitting the bottom of the hull. You can see it's actually sitting on the oil pan right now, and there is quite a gap between the mounting surface of the hull and the mounting surface of the engine. A considerable amount of that is actually taken up by the motor mount, and you can see on the front side it actually doesn't need much there for spacing. On the back side, however, needs considerably more. Definitely have to do a little bit of thinking about this, do some calculations, and figure out the angle of the drive shaft and stuff. I'm going to be pulling the pump out, pulling that center bearing out, and checking a whole bunch of stuff before I go ahead with doing anything with the mounts. Alright folks, with a little bit of persuasion from a plastic hammer and a piece of 2x4, I was able to get the soulless pump out. You can see it sitting on the floor over there. And now we can see a little bit of the challenge that will lie ahead. This is the pump that I'm going to be installing on this. It is a 148 pump off of a Kawasaki. It mounts in from the backside. There's a gasket around there. It fits into a hole and tightens up, and Bob's your auntie. But with this, there's going to be quite a bit of finagling to actually get this to work. Basically what I'm going to have to do is probably start cutting away at stuff and seeing what kind of clearance that I'm working with. Whatever I have to do, I will do, but we have to make sure that the angle of the drive shaft matches the angle of the crankshaft. You don't want a misalignment between the two couplers, or you, one, will destroy couplers and rubber bushings, whatever they're called, buffers, and also you waste a lot of horsepower. So we're going to do what we can to get that lined up perfectly, and that's probably going to mean a whole bunch of modifications back here and some modifications under the hull as well to get the engine to fit in at the correct angle.
Fuck that, I'll do what I wanna do. I got a different path from everyone, and that includes you. Who are you to tell me how to live life? In these times it feels like nobody's right, yeah. So I'ma figure out what else to succeed, and then invest all of my time in to them proceed. I need whatever the hell could make
Being a YouTuber, recording all that footage and it'll probably get condensed to like 5 seconds. That is much better. So, it looks like I'm gonna have to modify the hull slightly to get this to go in. I need the shaft to engage further with the spline. One other thing I want to check is how much is gonna have to come off to get the ride plate to fit. Okay. So I'm probably gonna have to make a custom ride plate. There's gonna be quite a bit of work involved in getting this pump to fit. Looking at it from here, it looks like the engine is way higher on the front than it is on the back, but it's somewhat of an optical illusion because the front of the hood, or this area, is actually quite a bit lower than it is at the back. So just to show you guys what I'm talking about, I've got my level here, and you can see it's actually about 7 degrees tilted forward. Show you that my floor is level. So my floor is 0 there. The hull itself is 6 degrees, 7 degrees that way. And the engine is only actually 3 or 4 degrees in this direction. So that's actually not too bad. You guys won't be able to see this, but I did make sure that the coupler is actually perpendicular, or the drive shaft is parallel to the crankshaft. So when I slide it in, the distance between the fingers on the top and the bottom are actually the same. So that's good. And just to make sure I wasn't giving myself a false reading, I actually blocked the drive shaft into place to see if I can get you a shot of that. So what I'm going to do now is actually measure from the center of the shaft to the top of the hull up here. And then when I'm mounting the pump, I can see if I can get that shaft back into that location. This is the 1100 pump, and it has a gasket around the outside of it. So I want to get something that will fit over this that I can then attach into the hull. So I want something that will fit over this and then I can glue into the hull. And this is about 6.5 inches. So I've been looking all over my shop. I did some research online and tried to find some pipe, something like this. This is just one that I had sitting around for something else, but this isn't nearly big enough. And then Jacob had given me some material, and I thought, oh, this will be perfect. But it is exactly 6.5 inches, so I can't use that because I actually need it bigger than 6.5 inches so that the pump goes inside of it. I was trying to figure out what to do. I was thinking, well, if I get a bucket and pour some resin into it, some thickened resin, I can pour it in, and then what I can do is actually machine a hole in the center of it that's 6.5 inches, and then I can glue that into the hull. And then I started looking around a little bit and I found this. So what I'm going to do is actually cut a piece out of this. This is about 6 5/8 across the top, and it tapers out. It is about 9 inches at the bottom, almost exactly 9 inches. So if I cut the right part of this, I can simply use this piece to put my pump in. With a little bit of tapping from a plastic hammer, this is now fitting snugly in place. It's almost hard to tell that there's even a ring on there because it fits perfectly. And now the tricky part is going to be making this fit into the hull. I'm gonna have to remove some material, and yeah, there's not exactly a manual on how to do this, so I'm gonna have to get creative. I've been hacking away at this hull for a couple of hours now, and you guys might be a little bit panicked when you see what I do, especially Jacob. But I assure you I'm a professional. YouTube pays me at least $3 a month. I had to hog out quite a bit of material through this area. I actually removed down to the foam. And I probably could have got away with not going quite to the foam, but I did that on purpose because what that's going to allow me to do is actually cut away a little bit at this foam and tack into the backside of this fiberglass. There's not enough room to add material on the side that you can see. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to cut out probably about 5/8 of an inch, half an inch of foam on the backside. And then when I do my filling, I can actually attach on the inside of the hull a little bit. And I will build this up with fiberglass and epoxy so that it's nice and strong. So the way that this is going to work, this ring will sit in here, something like this. And as you guys can see, there will be a substantial amount of area that I have to fill in there. That will all be fiberglass and epoxy. The ring will get fiberglass and epoxied in. And if the steering cable ever has to be replaced, well, I feel bad for the guy who has to do that. Once this is all set in place, the pump can just slide into there. It will take a plastic hammer or something to actually drive it into place. So what I'll do first is drive the plastic ring on. You can see it doesn't go on with a huge amount of difficulty, but it goes on tight enough that we don't have to worry about it sealing. We'll put the pump in place first, just like this, and then we can slide the drive shaft right into there. There we go. I quite obviously still have some stuff to do, some trimming and some finalized fitting. A bunch of the stuff on the bottom here is going to have to be removed. I will grab the ride plate now and show you guys that this quite clearly is not going to line up without modifying or making a new ride plate. I've been able to take a short break from doing YouTube shorts and actually do a little bit of work on this hull. I got the pump fitted in place. I got a bunch of material cut out around the pump, and I've used some very high-tech tools like bolts and pieces of wire and a little cardboard cutout template to make sure that the shaft is at the right height, that it's centered, that the pump is level, and yeah, that it is kind of parallel to the drive shaft and all that good stuff. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to use some epoxy to lock this ring into place. I might end up using a little bit of fiberglass. Mostly I'm going to use a thickened epoxy, and then try to actually pull the pump out. Also, I'm going to have to enlarge the, what do you call it, the pump shoe a little bit, because this pump shoe and tunnel were designed for a 140 pump, and I'm now running a 148. Showing this stuff on camera, I'm kind of wondering if Jacob's not like pooping his pants a little bit, seeing me chop his hull all to pieces. I'm sure he's fairly confident that I'm gonna make this work, but oh, I think we're almost there. Yes, 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 yes. What I ended up doing is pouring the epoxy in around, and it went, you know, on top of this and on top of this. And so now I have this ring that I can build on top of, and the pump fits perfectly into there. So I have a whole bunch of work to do, but this is now held into the place where it needs to be. So that's really exciting. That is a huge step. I really thought it was going to take a lot more effort to get this done. Well, I definitely did this in a silly way. I have the templates cut out and installed, glued in place, and I have my epoxy mixed up. The silly thing that I did was I did this before turning on the camera to show you guys, so now I'm gonna have to rush through this really quick. Basically, I have left some openings on the top here. The idea behind this stuff, it is milled fibers and epoxy with some black coloring. I'm going to put it into the mold. I haven't thickened it up very much because I want it to run down into all the nooks and crannies. Speaking of which, I better do that now before it starts to cure, because yeah, that's what epoxy does. I've started to clean up some of the mess. There's a bunch of epoxy that got on the hull in places where it wasn't supposed to be. And so yeah, I've started to clean that up. I also started to remove the cardboard template backing mold thing, whatever you want to call it. And I've got to the point now where I basically need to start using sandpaper or something a little more substantial than my fingers and a razor blade to pick away at stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. I've spent a whole bunch of time removing epoxy and tinkering around with things. I've got it all tapered in on both sides through the pump shoe area. I've also cut the grate, which is here. I also removed the epoxy and fiberglass from that area. And so now I have an intake grate that fits in there. And I just need to come up with a way to fasten it down. I'm not sure exactly what's going on back here yet with the ride plate and the pump. So what I'm planning on doing is waiting until I get the ride plate done. I might make something where this actually attaches to the ride plate or something. So I'm not going to bother drilling or doing anything like that quite yet. I still have to put some thickened epoxy in through this area and around the back of the ring. The reason why I didn't do that while I was doing the pump shoe is because I want to be able to focus on doing this really well. It needs to be sanded, cleaned up, and I need to put some thickened epoxy on here to not only bond the ring in really well, but also to make sure that it is sealed so that water doesn't run into the hull. I would say the hardest part of this is done. Getting the pump shoe sorted out and getting this ring put in place was the hard part. But I still do have to modify the pump in order to actually mount it to the hull in some way. So that could be quite challenging as well. I didn't get any footage of it, but I machined a bunch of material off of the pump, and I also made some brackets. I had to make a few extra pieces so that I could weld these brackets on in more than one place just to make it a little stronger, and I'm really happy with the way they turned out. While this was cooling off, I decided to rethink this a little bit and rework it just a tad on the go to make my life a little bit easier. So what I did is I grabbed the angle grinder with a flap disc and ground a bit of material off, and then I also grabbed the die grinder and basically chamfered some edges so that my welds would go a little bit more smoothly, hopefully. So I'll show you guys what I did now. First thing I did was ground these down, and that's going to make it easier for me to get my torch and my welding rod in there, because when you put the torch here, the arc is just going to want to jump to here or here, so I need to be able to get down into that root. So I ground this, and obviously you can see, maybe it's not obvious, I use a die grinder to grind this down and in here. This one is still going to be really tricky. I might not be able to do it here or here, but now that I have these parts ground out here and here, I should be able to lay a bead in there a lot more easily. I continued on with that same idea, and I ground the corner off of this piece just to make it easier to get in there. Again, with a sharp edge sticking out here, the welder would have just tried to weld the tip of this, and now I can get right down into the root of there and make a nice weld. And I did the same thing over here along this edge. I wasn't even considering doing this edge, but now that I see how well some of the other stuff is welded, I think I'll give this a try. If it gives me too much trouble, I'll probably just give up on it, because I don't want to melt this edge and then have to rebuild that or rework it. And there is a threaded hole for the nozzle that goes here, and then one on the other side as well. Alright, should I try it this way or this way? I'm going to try it this way. You guys have no idea. Oh, I should probably get a welding helmet instead of just a hat. That would be great. Alright, I'm going to backfill. I got a way nicer start over here. Wow. Wow. Okay. That's as far as I got with modifying the pump and the hull. As most of you know, I recently broke my knee, and although I've been making a fairly speedy recovery, it has been slowing things down. I've also been working on a few other projects, such as tearing the C-Rat engine down after we sank it, hydro-locked it, and bent a connecting rod. I plan on releasing that video this Wednesday. I've also been doing a little bit of work on the crash. I got some parts for it, and I need to get into tearing down and rebuilding the crank. The next part of this project is locating and drilling the mounting holes for the pump. Once I have the pump mounted, I can do the finishing work on the pump tunnel. Once I have that taken care of, I can then figure out stuff like the steering linkage and the ride plate. I recently discovered that the carbon fiber ride plates that I made last year actually fit on this hull, and so I might either make a new one that is slightly modified to fit this hull with this pump, or I might modify one of the ride plates that I already have. If you guys want to support me on Patreon, there is a link in the description below. A big thank you to those of you who are already supporting me there. And if you guys want to see extras, outtakes, and random nonsense, I have a link to my second channel, which is Lowered Expectations. Link in the description below. That is going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.